I'm willing to say he's the Naismith Coach of the Year.
It's 2 games. They got to get something rolling.
It's the Sports Saga podcast presented by Aldias Electric. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, share, leave us your feedback, follow us across all social media, and follow and subscribe to us on all of our watching and listening platforms. Use that link tree in the description below. I'm Brady Kudo. I'm with Keegan Hamlet and our guest from Impact Sports Management. His name is ALEX BEAUDRY. Alex, I hope I said that right. Alex,
you did.
Cool. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Most importantly, how are you and how did you get the free time to join us?
I'm doing great. So thank you, Brady and Keegan, for having me on. I'm excited to talk football. The life of an agent is, at least for a first year guy. So I got certified with the NFLPA in 2021. So this is my first go about the draft class. There are days where I'm swamped. I'm talking to finance people, talking to teams, traveling to pro days. And then there's other days where it's kind of a lot of sitting around waiting. At least right now, as we get to the draft and we get past it, things will get busy. But right now, there are a ton of agents that'll have second careers, whether they practice law, whether they have their MBAs, they could be doing business consulting, whatever it is. There are times of the year where, as an agent, you have a lot of free time. So, I was happy to make this work, and I'm glad you guys could accommodate my schedule, and this is great.
Yeah, of course. So let's talk about, you said many agents have second careers. You have your own endeavor in your own podcast. It's called Hitting Pay Dirt by Impact Sports. Tell us about that. What created it? Where can we listen to it? What do you do?
Sure. As I mentioned, I got certified in October with the NFLPA. So as of October 1st, I could begin recruiting. I could be talking to athletes, trying to sign guys as their college careers wrap up and they turn their eyes to the professional ranks. And, as a first year independent agent, it's tough. There's 850 or so agents, and there's only 1,700 active players in the NFL. So if you do the math, there's about one agent for every two players. And then you take that one step further, there's, the Drew Rosenhauses, the David Mulligettas, the big agencies who have 50 or 60 guys that they represent. So the numbers start to really kind of dwindle. And I found out pretty quickly that athletes, especially guys who have really good chance to make it to the NFL, they're getting bombarded by agents probably daily. And it's probably not just them. It's probably their parents, their friends, anybody with a connection to them. So I tried to find a way to get my name out there, get my brand out there. Also, as an agent, financing and cash flow is difficult. If I got 6 guys in this draft class, if none of them make it, and hopefully it doesn't happen, but it certainly could. The NFL is a tough business. I don't get paid a dime, and I have expenses. I have a mortgage, I have a house, I have a wife and kids. So the podcast was potentially another avenue of revenue. So I started it for brand and marketing, potentially another revenue source. And that's kind of how I got into it. On the podcast itself, I talk about the inside workings of football, the finances of football, a lot of contract breakdowns. Right now, I'm doing a lot of like mock drafts. I do a mock draft Monday with a buddy of mine, kind of breaking down the first round. Where do I think things will go? What are teams looking for? What's it look like from the athlete standpoint? So I'm really just trying to give my listeners an inside view of what's going on in the football world.
You want to talk about like the clients, colleagues you might work with, how they helped you, like your personal growth, like within your first year of doing this?
Yeah. So, the big thing from a personal growth standpoint for my clients is training, making sure they're getting the right training. They're talking to nutritionists, getting their body right. College football is brutal on the body. I don't know if either of you guys played, but, 12, 13, 14 weeks of high level football is hard on the body. So making sure they're healthy, making sure they're training. And, the combine and pro days is a different type of training than what these athletes are used to. Football is a lot of explosive movements. The combine is straight line running and some agility work. And then jumping. So kind of a different training set for what these guys are used to. And, you wouldn't think running 40 yards is in a straight line is very technical, but it's extremely technical. How you start, how you get off, your steps. There's a reason why, some of these trainers have 15, 16 guys from the combine go to their facility. It's because, they got it down pat, and it's kind of like studying for a test. So you got to make sure your guys are having good workouts, because if you're a fringe guy and you have a bad pro day, that could be the end of your NFL career before it even gets started. So that's the big thing. And now that pro days have come and gone, it's a lot of just trying to stay patient. It's hard. It's hard for me. It's even harder on my athletes. They worked for 8 weeks to get ready for their pro day. That's now come and gone. And now interviews with teams, and hopefully teams are reaching out. If they're not in the next, 10 days or so, that's a sign too. So it's a lot of waiting and hoping the work you put in.
So we did lose you for a minute. You froze. I was just making sure everything's all right. So before Impact Sports Management, were you an agent? Did you always wanted to be an agent? Take us through that.
Yeah. So I always wanted to be an agent. I went to Marquette University Law School here in Milwaukee, which is where I'm based out of. And at the time, they were one of a few programs that had a sports law specific program. So I studied professional sports law. I studied amateur sports law. And it's what I always wanted to do. I had a small internship with a local sports marketing firm here in Milwaukee. But when I got out of law school, it's hard to break into this industry. And at the time, my mom had worked for an insurance brokerage firm, and that's the route I ended up going. And I did that for the last 6, almost 7 years out of law school. So I sold health insurance to employers. I set up their employee benefit plans, and that was a good living. But I've always had this itch to get back to sports, and the timing was right. I applied to the NFLPA back in 2020. And then of course, COVID hit. So I had to wait a little bit longer. So it really kind of tested me there. Like, okay, is this something you really want? And luckily my wife is, behind the scenes supporting this, because it's not easy to leave, a job where you're getting paid every 2 weeks. You have health insurance, 401k, kind of steady income. And now it's, kind of like high stakes fantasy football, where my income is directly reliant on these athletes going out and performing. Because like I said, if they don't get paid, I don't get paid. So, it's a big risk, but it's something I always want to do. And I'm not getting any younger. So I said, if I'm going to try it, I'm going to try it. And now's the time. And I've had a blast. I'm very excited I did it.
Was there like a turning point that made you say, oh, I want to give up insurance, and you're applying for the NFLPA? Was there like a moment that made you decide that?
Yeah. I mean, I looked at, and I made some great relationships in insurance. So I don't want to make it sound like it was the worst thing in the world. And I'm glad I did it for a lot of variety of reasons, but I just looked at, okay, this is my life for the next 30 years. And I got very comfortable in it. And there's just always something nagging me that I wanted to do something more. And I just said, I don't necessarily want to be in this same office for the next 30 years selling health insurance. Again, great living. There's a lot of money in it. I had great clients, but I would have regretted never having taken this chance. So, a lot of times, people worry about taking action as the biggest risk. But in my opinion, from where I was sitting in my chair, the biggest risk would have actually been doing nothing. And I think at the end of my life, whenever that comes, I would have regretted not trying it. So I just said, what the hell, let's give it a shot. And if I can't make it, then I can always go back into health insurance. It'll always be there. So
my grandmother has always said, if you don't try, you'll never know.
Exactly.
And I love her. And that's something like, and Keegan and I are both trying to break in, not necessarily a sports agency, but the sports broadcasting industry. And what happens, Keegan? Like, if we don't try to put our names out there, we'll never know what's going to happen. And we've both thankfully got on the right side of that stick. So, Impact Sports Management, what is your goal with that? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, great question. It's a lot of kind of figure it out as you go, if I'm being honest. Success to me looks like, 5, 10 years from now, I'd love to be in that top 10% of sports agents where I got a good group of guys, 15 to 20 active clients, with a nice recruiting pipeline. And, uh, uh, look at us like we're snake is, don't get my gobble, make sure they can still play on Saturday. I think some of that's shifting with name, image, and likeness now. So hopefully those relationships can start to mend. And there are bad actors, but there's bad actors in every business. And, I want to do it the right way. I want to make sure my guys are care of first year, the 15th year, they can look back and say, working with Alex was the best decision of my life. And, being about 7-8 months into it now, it's a lot of building relationships, not only with athletes, but financial people, workers' comp people, when your players get injured, marketing firms, brands, all of that, just trying to build out that network similar to anybody breaking into a new career. And again, just doing it and setting up my athletes with the best people to take care of them. Because going into an agent, there's a lot of responsibilities. It's not just contract negotiations. Your best players might sign 2 contracts after their rookie deal. If all you did was contract negotiations, you're probably not worth what your athlete's paying you. So it's, marketing opportunities, sponsorships, taxes, finances, and you may not be the one doing all of that work, but making sure there's the right people who are. So just building up that network, and hopefully in 5-10 years, I'll be considered in that top echelon of agents.
Do you want to talk about the process of how the agent meets up with the player? Like, do they start communicating during the season, after the season, right before the draft combine? How does that work?
Yeah. So in your first year, you cannot recruit a player until you are certified. So this was a bigger class because it was the last 2 years combined, but my class of new agents, we weren't supposed to, I'm sure some did, but we weren't supposed to, solicit an athlete until you're certified. So as of October 1st, you're reaching out. You learn pretty quickly that the teams from the bigger schools, a lot of them will have picked their agent prior to their senior season, just because they don't want to have to deal with it.
Right.
So the summertime's a big time for recruiting. A lot of travel, meeting with parents. Athletes can't sign with an agent until their career is over. Otherwise, they forfeit their eligibility. But they will have met with however many agents they will have met with, and they probably narrowed that list down to 1 or 2. And then at the end of the season, as soon as their last game's over, they can sign with that. With NIL, it's changing even more rapidly because you guys see it. There's athletes that are partnering with brands while they're still in college, likely because of an agent. So as long as that agent does a good job on the NIL side, they're likely to retain that client for, the NFL contract advising piece as well. But that's not always the case. I mean, we've seen this year a handful of people have fired their NIL agent and gone with a different agency. So, but it's a longer process. This year, it was kind of really quick. Again, going after, I have a lot of FCS and Division II athletes. So I was kind of talking to them after their season was over, keeping an eye on the All-Star game circuit. Everyone's heard of the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine Bowl, but there's 4 other All-Star games where athletes are going to, and you get a sense of who's watching these kids and what are scouts looking for and who's got a shot to kind of make it. And, for me, the FCS kids have a ton of talent, but they don't get the same attention that your Big Ten, your SEC schools do. So that's where I was able to sign some great guys. And I'm really excited for the next 10 days here as we go through the draft. There was a lot of social media outreach. I think as an agent, as you build out your agency, you'll rely more on referrals than you will be using social media to do cold outreaches. So that was kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope that kind of gave you a good scope of, what agents are doing.
No, that's actually really cool, because I've always wondered, because obviously there's more to it than what people see. So I'm actually happy that you asked that question, because as a fan, I've always wondered, like, you take Drew Rosenhaus, for example, like, all right, what does this guy do like day to day? Because I know he just doesn't sit there and wait for the phone to ring.
No.
Hey, I want to sign, I don't know, Keegan Hamlet to a 4-year contract, right? So I actually like that was a good answer. So do you plan on starting, or would you want to go into like have an NIL branch, or maybe go into basketball or baseball?
I will probably stick to football. It's what I know best. NIL, you can kind of be a jack of all trades. When it comes to representing like NBA players or Major League Baseball players, every league has their own collective bargaining agreement. They have their own rules for agents. It's generally expensive. And, you look at baseball where there's a ton of professional players, right? Because while the minor leagues, you also have to wait 3 to 5 years for that guy to make it to the major leagues.
Right.
And then when they do get to the major leagues, you have to worry about getting fired and them hiring Scott Boras. And then in the NBA, I think Clutch Sports, I mean, between them and maybe a couple of other agents, they probably rep, I would say, close to half the league.
Yeah.
And there's just less players. Teams are smaller. So football is kind of where I'm in, and the NHL, I don't know anything about. So here in Wisconsin, we don't have a professional team, so I don't really pay attention until it comes playoff time. So, football is kind of where I made my niche. Will I branch out into NIL? Absolutely. I think you have to. What's interesting is when I first thought about getting into the agency business, at the time, 2020, before NIL, you just thought it would only be like it was. You would go after college athletes. Now, I think you'll see top high school athletes have agents going into college.
Yes.
You saw that kid from California who's going to the University of Tennessee. He just signed an $8 million NIL deal. I can guarantee you that an agent set that up. So that kid's going to have representation going into college. And I think that will be true for your 4 and 5 star recruits, which is kind of crazy to think about, but it's the way the world is going. And while I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where, the average NIL deal right now is still about $1,000. So for the vast majority of kids who are getting sponsorship opportunities, it's $500 here, $1,000 here, maybe $2,000 there. But as you see the money go and, kids are signing multi-million-dollar NIL deals or even 50,000 NIL deals, you'll see more agents get into that space. And again, if you can build that relationship while they're in college, you can give them a little bit of money, you treat them right, good customer service. The natural progression is for that relationship to continue when they get to the professional level. So yes, definitely an area I will get into. But yeah, that's probably another year or two down the road.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, I didn't realize that somebody that's a senior high school signed this $8 million deal.
He's a junior in high school. Think about that.
Who is it? Who?
Hold on, give me 30 seconds. I think it's is his name Nico?
Did you know
he's a quarterback?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Man.
Yeah, Nico Amaliva.
Oh, that's news to me. And he's going to Tennessee?
He's from the state of California, and he's going to Tennessee. Signed an $8 million deal.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is something. Well, and we'll say this, these next 10 days, I know for you, going to be exciting. Next Thursday is going to be really exciting. Make sure you tune into the NFL draft. I believe ESPN and ABC have the coverage of that. Alex, best of luck to you and your clients next week and in the coming weeks, especially with the undrafted free agent signing period and all that. We'll be looking out for your clients to see where they go. Best of luck to you and the business as well. I'm excited. I really hope you do make it, because in 5 years, if you're in that top 10% like what you want to be, I want to be like, I interviewed him.
Yeah, that's the point, right? Yeah, it'll be fun. This year's draft's going to be crazy. Anything can happen in that first round. I know you guys are sitting there in Patriots land. I can see the banners behind Keegan. You guys
Brady though.
Just teasing, and Patriots fan. I'm sitting without a first round pick. Devontae Adams is better than any receiver in this draft class.
Oh, you're a Raiders guy.
I'm a Raiders guy. Yes.
Okay. Well, you guys are in the gauntlet that is now the AFC West.
Yes.
So best of luck to the Raiders, and yeah, the Patriots have an interesting decision to make, whether they go. I think Andrew Booth's the name to watch.
Andrew Booth, that's the name
Um,
that's been floating around.
or maybe a N'Keal Harry replacement. There's going to be a run on wide receivers, so we'll see. We'll see, but it's going to be fun. That middle of the draft. So I'm sitting here in Packer land. Packers are king around here. We got 2 first-round picks, and they're in the same boat. Do they draft a wide receiver? Do they trade up? Do they trade back? The middle of the draft's going to be a ton of fun. So
what pick are they at?
22 and 28.
22 and 28. Oh, they got to take a receiver with at least one of them.
If they don't, there'll be a riot in the street.
Oh,
the street.
Yeah. No, seriously. I think you at 22, you got to think Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. One of them is going to be there.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of talk. At least I've heard Jameson Williams is going to be the first receiver off the board. That's what I've heard. I don't know. I don't agree. I think it should be Olave, but I think that they got to get at least one. And then, what do you think? Maybe corner? Do they go with?
It'll be interesting. I do think they go wide receiver. It'll be interesting to see whether they have to trade up to get one. I mean, a name around 22 could be Treylon Burks from Arkansas.
Oh, that's right.
Olave. If they wait till 28, a name to watch might be Christian Watson. This draft could go anywhere. Jameson Williams probably would have been the number 1 wide receiver off the board had he not torn his ACL. And you wonder what teams are thinking about in terms of that, just because he tore it so late in the season. He tore it, in the national championship.
Yeah.
So does he slip? That'd be a great find for Packers. I think they could use help on the offensive line and especially the defensive line. So do they go D tackle at 22? Maybe a guy like Devontae Wyatt out of Georgia. They got some options, and it's fascinating. I don't have anybody in the first round, so I get to sit here and play fan like the rest of us, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, it's gonna be great TV, must watch.
Yeah, it's gonna be a crazy draft. I know we're looking forward to it. One of the more exciting drafts as of late, because there's not, I said this last week, I'll say it again, there is not a consensus number 1 overall pick.
Yep.
Not only is there not a consensus number 1, but I've seen, you got to be careful with mock drafts because media guys are hearing from whoever their sources are and where guys are kind of rising and falling. Scouts pretty much got their boards pretty much locked in by this point. So, you see like risers and fallers. That's really not the case. It's just the media is finally catching up to where teams feel these guys should go. But if you follow any mock drafts, you could see guys like Kyle Hamilton's a perfect example. I've seen mock drafts that have had him go at number 1, and I've seen other mock drafts that have him go at 15. Trayvon Walker, he could go number 1. Evan Neal, Aiden Hutchinson. Does a quarterback break into the top 2? There's not only is there uncertainty at the top of the draft, from picks 1 through 15, there's unlimited amount of possibilities. Yes, it's going to be chaos.
I've just seen that the 2 names, and I'm really interested to see this on Thursday. 2 names that supposedly have just slipped and slipped and slipped: Kyle Hamilton and Kayvon Thibodeau. Those are the 2 names I've heard. Really fast.
And then you have 8 teams this year without a first round pick, which means there's 8 teams with multiple first round picks. And the Saints have 2 now. Do they trade up? Does Kansas City trade up? Do the Packers trade up? Do the Eagles trade back because they seem to like more draft picks? There's so much to have here. I mean, it's going to be a great draft. I'm really excited for it.
It is. I agree. So that's going to conclude this episode of the Sports Saga podcast. Be sure to check out all of our upcoming content, and be sure to check out all of our previous content. Find us on social media. Hit that like and subscribe button as well. For Alex Beaudry, best of luck this week. I really do mean it. And Keegan Hamlet, I am Brady Kudo, and happy draft season.